Here is something that's both true and uncomfortable. Effective altruism started as a genuinely good idea. And look, I think that matters because the most consequential philosophical mistakes are usually the ones that began with something right. So William MacAskill's initial premise was elegant. If you care about doing good, care rigorously about it. You use evidence, you measure impact. You don't fund the charity that makes you feel virtuous, you fund the one that saves the most lives per dollar. So it was the argument of malaria nets over gala dinners, direct transfers over bureaucratic overhead, and it's the kind of thinking that does make intuitive sense. And for a while, it spread through the exact communities that you'd expect. Thoughtful people who wanted their concern for the world to be more than performative. And then it hit Silicon Valley, and something about it fundamentally changed. The vocabulary stayed the same: data, impact, rationality, and scale. But what changed was who was applying it and to what. So because effective altruism at its core is a framework for deciding which problems deserve resources, when the people running that framework have billions of dollars yet no democratic accountability, it is no longer philanthropy, it's shadow governance. And so that malaria nets argument works because the premise was constrained. You have a fixed sum, a measurable intervention, and a documented outcome. But when you scale that logic up, it becomes the general theory of how wealth should move through the world, it stops being rational analysis and it becomes ideology. Someone still has to decide whether the highest impact intervention is a HIV medication program in sub-Saharan Africa or a longevity clinic for people who are already going to live long lives. So the data doesn't make sense on that call. Values do. And whose values exactly are we going to be talking about? So DOGE made this painfully clear last year. The framing was efficiency, the language is about optimization, but what actually happened was a set of people with a particular worldview, and they decided which parts of the state were worth keeping and acted on that with judgment and speed and the confidence of people who've never had to be wrong in public before. And I think that that's how effective altruism converts at scale. And I would say that that's not the version that William MacAskill wrote about. It emerges when the philosophy migrates from the individual giving donations into the architecture of public institutions. And I know that I'll be deeply reprimanded when I say this, but we also need to tell a very different story about bureaucracy, because I think a lot of us miss the point. Bureaucracy is slow. It is sometimes captured. It resists change in ways that, can protect incumbents and frustrate reform. All of that is true. But bureaucracy also does something that this private rationality can't do. It is accountable to more than one person's theory of what matters. So it funds the unglamorous, and that may not matter to you, but it matters to somebody else. It holds obligations that don't have good ROI. It's to people who aren't productive, or to problems that don't scale, to functions that exist precisely because markets won't touch them. And so when we treat that as only waste, I don't think we're being rational. The deeper issue with effective altruism isn't that it's wrong. It's that it's a partial view of the world. It captures something real about how to think about things at the margins, but it fails to completely develop as a theory of how power should be organised. And the tragedy is that it moved from one register to the other without anyone quite noticing the moment it crossed over. So MacAskill was trying to make individual giving more rigorous and impactful. And what his philosophy became in the hands of the people who adopted it most enthusiastically was a justification for replacing democratic distribution with private judgment. And that doesn't make a better version of good. That's just centralised power with better branding.